Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our friend, Fred Schaufeld. How's it going, Fred?
Thank you.
How's it going, Fred?
Great. I'm slightly depressed because the practice woohoo was actually bigger than the real woohoo. It was kind of awkward when I was sitting back there during the practice.
Well, thank you for being a Startup Grind speaker. Well, actually, I've been working on this to get you for quite some time, so I'm really excited to hear your story. I think your story is a really powerful story, so hopefully we'll have a lot of tweets tonight. We always like to start off on a personal note, so we'll go way back. Where were you born? Where you raised? What did your parents do? And perhaps talk about your first entrepreneur experience as a child.
I was born in Westbury, Long Island, and at a very young age. Yeah, feel free. That was actually a joke. Just let it out. It's fine. My parents, my real mom and dad were actually partners in a used car business. And it's kind of, I had a kind of interesting background a little bit, and multiple fathers, a little bit of dysfunction, by the way, creates a little bit of innovation. I realized, they say the necessity is the mother of innovation, but, no, excuse me, of invention, right, I knew that, yeah. This first beer of the evening. But dysfunction helps create a little bit of innovation because it kind of frees you from a few things. So my first job was selling personalized greeting cards for the Wallace Brown Company, door to door out of a pitch book, and the neighbors signed up on these things, and it was the coolest thing in the world that I could sell greeting cards. And I graduated to a paper route. And where I would deliver Newsday papers off of my bicycle, and that sucked. I got bit in the ankle by a chihuahua, and that job lasted 1 week, and I was done with that. So those are my entrepreneurial things. I did have, when I was in 4th grade, I created a club. I was one of the few kids in my school with a typewriter, and we had a membership card, and I charged people, I think, $1 to join this club, and they would get not just the membership card, but a full piece of paper. And I think that was the impetus for the extended warranty business.
But they had to buy a $300 typewriter. Is that what it was?
No, really, just the piece of paper. It was pretty good, and I think I got about 3 or 4 members there, which was, pretty good revenues, in 4th grade back in. God, that's a long way back. It was in the 1960s. Anyhow.
So, for those social media guys here. Hashtag Startup Grind. Usually there's an @ but this is you guys don't have a Twitter account.
Kind of below the radar.
Yeah. So hashtag Startup Grind. Hashtag Swan and Legend. Okay, great. So let's go let's fast forward to college.
Yes.
Actually you kind of had to grow up quickly as a 20-year-old. Is there, I believe your father had passed away, and there's a backstory with this, with George Zachary. He's a very famous angel investor in the Valley, and he had said that, what he noticed was entrepreneurs, and he's a backer of Elon Musk, but he had said that he just noticed that just entrepreneurs like Elon had struggles in the past, like their father passed away, or they had some strife with their parents or something, sort of like with authority. So, at a young age, you had experienced something very similar. How did that change you?
Well, first of all, remind me to tell you my Elon Musk story a little bit later.
Sure, okay.
So, yeah, my dad passed away when I was 20, when I was a junior at Lehigh University. It happens to a lot of people. People lose parents at younger ages. It's one of these things you don't wish upon anybody, of course, but there's a wisdom that comes with those types of things when you realize that life is short. Life is also a little bit strange because I didn't even know he was my father till 15 minutes after he died. So that kind of created a another little element in my head, like all the things I thought about who my father was and the history and all that, which was, kind of played out as I was driving this 2-hour drive back to school after a couple weeks off of dealing with this. And there was a song by a band called Seals and Crofts, and nobody here remembers Seals and Crofts, but I did. They had a song called Diamond Girl. Okay, so they had a second song, like a B-side song called We May Never Pass This Way Again. And it was such an aha moment. I heard this song and I said, wow, I get it now, finally. This is a one-way trip. I don't know if I'm gonna like when I get to the end of it, but the places I'm passing are kind of amazing. And there was an election at Lehigh University to be the concert chairman. That seemed like the coolest job. And you got to be the person that was, from the school's perspective, in charge of promoting all these rock acts. And I would have never had the cojones to run for this because I didn't want to get embarrassed. I didn't want to be humiliated by losing. And there's every cliche in the world, right? You miss 100% of the pitches that you don't swing at, things like that. And I did go for it only because I knew this would be my only chance. I was a junior at the time, and by some strange reason, I won it, and it is what gave me my business experience, which was phenomenal. In 1980 and 81, we promoted, I would say, without exaggeration, every act below the level of Bruce Springsteen and the Rolling Stones, who were touring between New York and Philadelphia. Lehigh University had a 6,800 seat arena. It was brand new, and it was just the most awesome thing in the world. So if you're going between these two acts, these two 20,000 seat arenas, in the off night, you wanted to pick up an extra night's revenue, you'd stop in the Lehigh Valley, and we would bring you in. And there was nothing like it there before. So it gave me a great experience. I'd also, just to mention Lehigh University, besides losing my dad, because of my setup and some of the elements, one element I mentioned to you before, my mom went flat broke after my father passed away. So I could no longer pay, for my junior year, I could no longer pay for Lehigh University. And I hadn't been on financial aid. I hadn't even filled out a financial aid form prior to that. And I went literally crying to a dean who was this boxer guy. He's a tough guy. And he said, well, he goes, Lehigh doesn't kick out seniors. And, set me up with all scholarships and loans to take me through for the rest of it. And I always appreciated that somebody was there at the one time. Now, I had to speak out. I had to, even with my quivering voice and all that, I had to go up and speak with them. But I always appreciated that. And after I paid off the last of the loans and all that, that's when the development office called and said, hey, how about, I said, I paid it off. They said, you didn't pay off anything. So, and they were right. So I benefited tremendously from that. So,
and actually, during that time, you had some of the, like you said, some of the biggest acts, like the Allman Brother Band, Cheap Trick, Rodney Dangerfield.
yeah.
Back when he was younger.
Well, he's dead now, so yeah. He was younger.
But I thought it was really interesting because when you had these shows, one show could have bankrupted you, right? I mean, you had hundreds of thousands of dollars on each show, and if they didn't sell out, then it could have bankrupted you. Like, would you run the business the same way? In that sort of risky business strategy, I guess?
So that kind of Big Bang Theory, the first show we did, which was booked by the prior concert chairman, but I got credit for it, was Frank Zappa. And that sold out the arena. He was a big act then. The second one was Journey, who still remains really big. Each one of those could have done that, but as we got more and more shows, and I think we did about 25 shows, which in a college year, it sometimes means almost a show a week and for people who are my age, they realize these were big acts at the time. As we got more used to it, as we got more knowledge under our belt, the chances of getting bankrupted with each show became less and less. Not only that, we created a reserve. We had some money that came from the kids, the student activities fund, but then, and by the way, most of the prior years, they actually did go bankrupt on the shows. They would do it wrong. But I did find that the shows that we were doing, people had such passion for them, and we marketed them quite well, and that actually created a lot of excitement for me, not just at that time, but even as I look at business today. We look for things that people are passionate about. If people are passionate about what you have enough, and you're kind of straightforward and you give them a good product, the risk goes down. So would I do that type of thing again today? I think because it worked, I probably would. That's not an empirical test, but I probably would. Again, it was one show at a time. The entire life cycle of the business was about 6.5 weeks, and that was it.
Actually, that's a really good question. I'll get more into your Swan and Legend VC fund, but do you look for entrepreneurs who sort of live on the edge like that, where they could literally go bankrupt, next month, or they could be $1 billion company?
No, I think they're freaking idiots. All right? Are you kidding me? 1 month? No. Because everything takes longer than you expect, and everything costs more than you think. All right, and a couple of our entrepreneurs are here, so don't even think about that kind of stuff. But I do think of very often we're telling people that we have confidence that they don't have. One, we might have confidence that we do know where they're going to get additional money if things go wrong, and we are often pushing them to go a little bit further, sometimes to narrow the focus. One of the things I found that entrepreneurs do is they sometimes try to go too wide. They're hedging the bet. I used to do the same thing, and people say, "Oh, well, what business are you in?" I'm just kind of, we got this market over here and this market over here, and knowing that there really was a good market that was kind of straightforward, but it was taking longer than we thought. The relationships weren't coming as easily as we thought, but still believing in the base idea. And I think that in that type of thing, going deeper into the base idea, even though it is more risk, it does take longer. You can convince investors to do that, and those are the businesses that I've seen that have succeeded. Which also, by the way, includes sometimes pivoting the base idea a little bit. But the people who try to come at it as a diversified, multi-line business with 35 things going on, that's the ones who are trying to hedge the bet. I don't think I've seen a lot of success that way.
Before I go into the NEW story, I wanted to talk about, just on the same line of what you talked about, but when entrepreneurs come to you and they're all like cocky and they're like, they're very prideful. In your story, you had, going back, you had moved in with your sister and your mother in Washington, and
we had separate bedrooms.
Separate bedrooms. Okay, got it. But there was a job for $200,000, and then basically taking a job for $35,000 a year, you had to swallow your pride. What do you think about entrepreneurs who are just sort of the opposite of that, where they think they know everything, and they need a little bit of ass kicking?
First of all, that was 1981. $35,000 was a lot of money back then. Okay. You could buy a beer for a quarter. Maybe not a quarter, but I was actually offered a job for $8,000 a year. Now that sucked. Okay. And it was from my brother-in-law. It was like an inside deal. That was the job I didn't take. But making $35,000 a year living with my mom, that was awesome. Are you kidding me? I had no expenses, except, it was tough to, date anybody. It was the first job I wanted to take, by the way, so you're asking about kind of pride swallowing a little bit. After having booked all these acts for Lehigh University, most of the acts came through 3 big New York agencies who would book these people nationally, and one of them agreed to meet me for a potential job interview, a company called ICM. And I went to the New York office, and I'm meeting, and it was really, my job interview was mostly with the receptionist. And she said, it's going to be for the mailroom. And I said, wait, you don't understand. I'm a college graduate. And she said, well, then you ought to be able to read the zip code. And I, to this day, I don't regret not taking the job because it would have sent my career on a different trajectory. I wouldn't have gone to law school and dropped out of that. But I do regret the reason, which was my own ego. I found out that the leaders in Hollywood, and we have an investment in Hollywood right now, they all started in the mailroom. You know, if you watched Entourage, it's not all real, but the career progression, that is real. That's the way it works. And I was too ignorant to know that, and my ego was too big to learn that on the spot. One of the things I found in my own business is that ego, you know, between myself and partners, between ourselves and clients, and things like that, it kills businesses because you make decisions for bad reasons. So swallowing the ego is a necessary thing. So one last thing, the $35,000, again, that was pretty psyched on that because it was commissions, it was working out well. The tough part is it took me about quite a while of riding around in my car getting doors slammed in my face from a bunch of car dealers before I made, $0,000. I mean, it was really, that was tough. It seemed like a really bad idea at first.
So I wanted to go right into the NEW story here. So what was the aha moment when your first job, again, was, you learned how to sell car warranty, and then you're thinking, hey, you can probably apply this to consumer electronics business. What was that aha moment to start NEW?
You know, I'd like to tell you that I ultimately did see a real big opportunity, and there are certain attributes of that business that are great that I look for today in any kind of business. It had recurring revenue, it was very asset light, and it particularly worked out great for our clients as well as us, and there were things we understood, we were a little ahead of the curve on that. But the real reason why I got into that business is after making $35,000 a year, I went out, by the way, I bought a brand new Fiat Spider. This is like the most awesome car in the world. Got my own apartment, 4100 Mass Avenue, got a studio apartment, enrolled in AU Law School at night, and making payments on the apartment, on the car, on the school, and everything is like really, really looking like pretty good. And during the day out selling these things. And every time I would learn a new law, I'd want to go to try to gain a practical application of this law, and I'd kind of try it out on my own company and say, well, how are they applying to this law? And I'd find that every time I learn a law, these guys are kind of breaking the law. These guys were based in Arizona. And the biggest thing they were doing, and you guys may catch on to this a little bit, it was fundamentally an insurance business. A customer would pay a car dealer, would pay me, I'd take the money and send it to Arizona, and then when the claims came and the transmission broke down, it's supposed to all work in reverse. Except it wasn't really working in reverse because the guy in Arizona who was supposed to be giving the money over to the insurance company wasn't. And based on things I was learning in law school, I was able to audit my own company and found out they weren't upstreaming the money. It made me the front man for the Washington, D.C. front man, me, a person who wanted to become a lawyer in this town, and I had a lot of respect for lawyers back then. Did I say that? That might have been the Tourette's jumping out. Anyhow, no, I had, and you knew that integrity was important in law, and I realized I was kind of the front man for a Bernie Madoff type of operation, literally. I had dreams of car dealers on that a bunch of the car dealers that I did business with were Iranian expats that had left when the Shah had come in, and they were on 10th Street in Arlington. I had dreams of them chasing me down 10th Street with tire irons when they found out that this was a big fraud. So I had to go out to Arizona, actually to San Diego, to see where the money wasn't showing up. I was supposed to go to the INA insurance company, and while so what I was really trying to do was to save my own skin. Because my father had died and I'd gone through all this stuff, this kind of thing didn't really freak me out quite as much as it may have. And I mean, it freaked me out, but not as badly as it probably would have had I not been through these bad experiences. And oh, by the way, I'll also share one more thing, just going back to the father thing. My parents only got married 2 days before my father died, and I personally arranged the wedding so that the whole town wouldn't find out they weren't married. That was like a big deal back in 1980 because my mother had been living with my father's name as her last name, and nobody in the town knew. It would have been a scandal. So like finding stuff like this out, like this, an insurance fraud, I'm Bernie Madoff's front man, that's no big deal. So I go up and I meet a company called Kelley Blue Book, and Kelley Blue Book had the same type of program. They had an insurance company behind it, and I set up an arrangement where we basically overcharged for the insurance with a credible A+ rated insurance company, and with the single purpose that the money would then slowly fill. I knew it was going to be a couple of years before this company went out of business. They were fundamentally a pyramid operation, but I saw it happening. It took approximately 1 year for them to go out of business, where we overfilled the coffers and took this extra commission this extra price that I was charging so that we would actually pay for past mistakes in the future. It's called cash flow underwriting. It's not really a great thing to do, but it's something you do in a troubled situation like that. And I went to every car dealer, and I was so young that they actually believed me, and I confessed 100% what was going on, and it took 60 days before the company I was working for, effectively the mafia, but a little bit stupider than the mafia, before they realized I was in direct competition with them and I had diverted the money. And God knows, the number of laws I probably broke in doing this whole thing. And while this whole thing was going on, my sister asked me to go out and buy a vinyl video disc player for my niece. And the guy at Montgomery Ward asked me if I want to buy an extended warranty on it. So the product did exist, and I said, my God, you could sell these on these products? By the way, there's one of two things that happened. And the second thing that happened is I had a VCR player, and they used to always tell you these really, it's a very, very delicate piece of equipment, and you have to treat it a certain way, and there's all these kinds of calibrations and things you had to do to make sure that it worked perfectly. They're very, very touchy. Well, mine had roaches in it, so I took a can of Raid and I sprayed it all over the heads and everything. The thing worked fine, so I said, this is pretty good risk. So those are my ideas in how to bring that business to the consumer side. I saw the Montgomery Ward people didn't know what they were doing. I took a look and saw what else was in the marketplace, and I realized that every extended warranty at the company at the time in the non-automotive, in the consumer products business, was running the same kind of cash flow underwriting scam that the car warranty company that I was working for was really running, with the sole exception, all right, that they weren't representing that they were giving money to insurance companies. They were actually representing that they were taking it and stealing it and going and buying expensive cars for themselves, which was interesting. By the way, I've seen that business plan since. So I knew the seam in the market. I spent way too much time explaining this, but I knew the seam in the market was if we could do this business ethically and come up with insurance, we could go out to retail stores and convince them that this product would work. And why would it work? Because it was the single most profitable thing in the car dealer, and it would be the single most profitable thing in the store. The reason why it was profitable, it was the only thing that took zero inventory investment. They had to buy all these VCRs and PCs and cars and all that stuff, but you don't buy this piece of paper until years into the future, or at least until after it's sold. There was no additional advertising or real estate or even personnel costs. And it was done so poorly by such a ragtag bunch of crooks that I thought we could do it better. In fact, my wife and I started a national trade association and wrote a model law that is actually the law. With modifications on it, it became the law in most states in the country. So to set like a baseline for that. I spent way too much time.
Oh, no.
Giving you, so it wasn't an aha moment. It was more like a holy moment because I thought I was in trouble.
Right.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yes, you are.
Okay,
we'll bleep it out later, but
good.
But no, this is actually a really interesting topic because honesty as a business practice. Do you think? You see all these businesses out there and little shady practices, but like, what's the benefit for being honest as a startup, as an entrepreneur? Does it like the Sunlight Foundation, they say it makes government more efficient, right? And it's basically because of the sunlight, it disinfects any kind of corruption because they're trying to find the best idea will always win. You know, again, like, do you think that honesty makes businesses just more efficient, and best ideas always come out the best? I mean,
Do I think the best ideas always come out the best? No. Do I think honesty always wins? No. I mean, it doesn't. And I'm being honest. All right? But I will tell you that it's a lot easier to remember. We view it as table stakes. I was part of an angel capital group, and I once sat through a pitch that a woman gave, and somebody asked a question, and she was clearly lying. And everyone in the room knew she was lying, and she knew she was lying, and everyone in the room knew that everyone in the room knew she was lying, except she didn't know that everyone else in the room knew she was lying. And it was so painful for all the rest of us. And I remember saying, I would never invest in her, period. You know, it's like you've seen certain sports stars who are clearly guilty, and they're just continuing the lie about a particular, you know, element of their life, and everyone else knows it. So it's painful. It's a lot easier to remember the true stories. It is way more efficient to keep it to the truth. We really tried to push it. You know, our business, the reason why there were 17 warranty companies. I didn't invent the warranty business in the consumer products business. I did not invent it. There were 17 companies shortly after the time I started, and we tried to start a trade association. 13 of them were absolute lying thieves. Luckily for me, a lot of them gained some market share. My method was to go into stores that, like Sam's Club, and explain to them, one, the merchandising concept worked, and two, you picked a liar. And they didn't like the bad-mouthing of the competitors, but that was our way of selling, being very, very straightforward.
so I wanted to kind of loop in a little bit of what you guys do at Swan, but you know, entrepreneurs are always. I'm actually looking at your watch to keep time.
Yeah, sorry.
Nice watch, by the way. But anyways,
If it's missing, I'll know where to look.
So, you know, as entrepreneurs, we're always trying to make our numbers look good, right, on presentations. So, like, where do you draw that line between, like, you know, the truth and like the extended truth, or they'll say our market says $1.3 trillion and we're going to get 50% of that. I mean, that's obviously a lie, right? As an entrepreneur, I mean, you as a VC, you're looking at that and say, how are you going to justify those numbers?
Yeah, look, I mean, the most important thing is who your partners are, who you're doing business with, what's going to happen when things go wrong. You know, people say, well, like the VC, we want to know, what's going to happen when things go wrong. What's the VC going to be like? Well, we say the same thing. And if you're dealing with somebody, there's one thing about being optimistic and then kind of footnoting it. And you have to be a bit of an optimist, to take a risk, right? You have to assume there's water down there before you take the leap. So that's kind of understood, but again, footnoting that. But it's table stakes to really, to be truthful. You can't, if your employees don't trust you, they're not going to follow you, period, unless they suck. All right? And they don't have another option, in which case they're lying to you because they're acting like they have another option, but they don't. So you both deserve each other. Okay? And if you have a bunch of stupid employees, that's a quick way to end the thing.
No, somebody's trying to come in here illegally.
Oh, okay. That must be the guys from Revolution. Anyhow.
Okay,
if you have a bunch of stupid employees and you're a stupid leader, then you're a stupid investment. And I got to tell you, it doesn't work long term. If you take the long view of things, it just doesn't work. You collapse in on yourself, period. So, there's certainly some gray area, where people are doing what they can. But as soon as you get caught in doing something like that, as soon as you trip up, you've lost all the brand equity in yourself that you built up. So it's bad business.
It's bad business.
And it's inefficient, right? You got to sit around and say, is that really the truth?
Right. So sort of like on the same vein of being honest with customers, let's talk about Best Buy and how they kind of changed their way of selling to customers and being showing less pressure to buy. What did they learn from you guys from NEW? Because I heard that they like what you guys did and they implemented it in their business and ultimately toppling Circuit City.
Best Buy and Circuit City were head-to-head competitors for a long time. And Circuit City, it was really believed in 1996 that Best Buy was going to go out of business. They were actually America's favorite, they had the franchise for selling consumer electronics and for PCs that were sold through physical retail stores. They were selling 10% of them in the country, and they were losing money on every one of them. One of the reasons why people liked to come there over Circuit City was the lack of pressure. When you went into Circuit City, the salesperson would immediately start pressuring you to buy the extended warranty. It wasn't one of our clients. And insurance and financing, and it was clear they were getting a big commission. It was clear that they were being pushed by their sales manager. And if they couldn't make that sale, they would latch onto you like a calf, and they'd follow you. And it was a miserable experience, and it was one that you'd put up with if you didn't have an option. Best Buy came out with an option that was, it was well lit, it was high ceilings, it was laid out like a Kroger department store with cashiers in the front. They gave people carts that you could push around. None of this existed in Circuit City. Circuit City was totally consultative. They called it consultative, but the consultant didn't know anything except his own commission. Circuit City was also literally had low ceilings. It was very dimly lit to make the projection TVs pop more and for other reasons. But they created such a miserable experience that people were coming in. I think they were coming about 5 times a year into Best Buy because they'd leave you alone. You could look at DVDs and CDs. At Circuit City, they would go maybe twice a year. And that kind of customer erosion kind of kills you. Again, the problem is Best Buy was losing money. We made it was common knowledge in the industry that I had come from, this warranty business, you could only sell them with commissions. One of the reasons why is there's a lot of things they didn't cover. They were priced very, very strongly. It was a very, very high price. Well, we didn't believe that. In fact, we had tested it, and I knew you didn't have to need the commissions with it. We brought the price down. We've totally simplified the terms. We made it cover everything. We threw out, I had to unlearn law, by the way, to succeed in business. Because if 2 people make a contract and one person performs and the other one pays, you aggregate a bunch of them together. You can learn that in business school because you'll see a trend. And that's the way 99% of contracts are. If 2 people, but those never make it to the law books. All right, it's the 1% where on day 2, the 2 people who make the contract are trying to screw each other. That's 100% of what you start with in the law business. And it was kind of the attitude that, and it's nothing, no knock on lawyers, but you gain a mindset after a while. It's like learning civics on Fox News. Okay, everybody's getting killed, everybody's getting knifed. If you're not getting knifed, you're getting hit by a drive. I mean, it's like, even though the percentages may be lower than ever that's happening, I'm ducking around when I'm filling up my car with gas now because I'm just waiting, for the bullets to come flying. Because, that's the attitude that we took, partly because of me when I first wrote these contracts, which were insurance contracts. And I had to unlearn that, and because it's the most consumer unfriendly attitude you could take. We took a different type of attitude after I heard a guy named Stu Leonard speak, and he was featured in a book called In Search of Excellence. Stu Leonard told a story. I'm not at time yet, right, Mike?
Oh, no, you have
because you're not going to pull another alarm again, are you? All right, Stu Leonard had a dairy up in New England. A woman came in and she goes, this milk smells awful. It's bad. And he takes the milk in the store and he smells it. He goes, milk's fine. She goes, this milk is sour. Right, that was a New England accent, okay? But obviously it wasn't so good then. It's not so good now. But he's arguing with her. People are watching the argument. He's explaining it's fine. She goes, I want my dollar back. And he goes, fine. Finally, he reaches into his pocket and he gives her the $1. And after he was done with this whole transaction, and she holds up the $1 and she goes, and I'm never coming back to your store. And he said, I realized a few things. all right? From the moment she came into the store, she was convinced the milk was bad. She was going to get her money back. She was going to get that refund. That was going to happen. But here's the things that didn't have to happen. I didn't have to alienate her. I didn't have to, alienate all the other people in the store who were watching this transaction, seeing me argue with this customer over what she was positive about. And, I'm out the milk. I'm out the goodwill of all the other customers. I'm permanently out this one customer, and I'm out $1. Okay? The $1 I was out from the moment she came in the store, period. But the rest of it, we could have fixed. That was the aha moment to fix NEW and to make it like the business that it became. We said, if the customer thinks it should be covered from the brochures, from the body language, if it is near the expiration date. We used to have an expiration date, then we had a hidden expiration date that went out months in advance, all right? We would cover it. Why? Because it was a profitable business and we'd make it up in volume. Then we brought the prices down, the margins we made them quite low because we found if we stayed to 10% of the price of the underlying product, 20% of the people would buy it almost not even ask about it. We found that the consumers were less sensitive about the actual length of the warranty than they were about the fact that it covers everything in the security. That margin allowed Best Buy to just ask a yes or no question to a consumer. We paid no commission to the salespeople. And when the customer, and I remember sitting with the senior salespeople at Best Buy, they said, well, when the customer objects, then what do? We said, you don't answer the objection. You say thank you, and you just move on. And they're like, this doesn't compute. You got to answer the objection. They said, no, let the customer go. And we would survey the customers out in the parking lot, and we found that if less than 10% of the customers were feeling pressure at all, we had a thing called a pressure meter, that we were okay. And we kept the pressure low, and over a period of years, Circuit City drove themselves out of business by high pressuring customers and a whole bunch of other things. And Best Buy became the #1 company in America. And there were over 10,000 employees by 1998 at Best Buy who saved their jobs. So we felt pretty proud about that.
No, I was going to ask, that's really amazing. I was going to ask about how to produce happy customers and if creating a happy customer to create a short-term loss versus angry customers for a short-term gain, you'd rather have the short-term loss but a happy customer. I wanted to do a really quick shift here, but this topic is actually a very hot topic here in DC that every time we do Q&A, people always ask about this, but it's about culture. And so, how important is culture to a company? I know it's like sort of like a pie in the sky and it's like ambiguous, but what is culture to you? How did you define that? Is that like implicit to core values? And then if it is, then how do you like reinforce that in your company? So NEW, let's give a good example of that.
We needed two things, and it's almost like a bicycle needs kind of a front wheel and a back wheel. One, there are certain absolute skill sets that a company needs, and you can't kid yourselves. And you got to get those skill sets wherever you get them. Two, the company works much, much better if everybody gets along really, really well. And we brought in people that everybody liked. For most jobs, you can teach the skills, the attitude, the getting along, the kind of, the moral type of thing, the golden rule stuff has to be there. So, there was a balance. When we found, I'll tell you one thing about NEW though. When there were a lot of like misfits, and I felt like a misfit myself, and I used to love bringing in people who felt like they were misfits or damaged goods, or they just, they didn't like look the IBM way or something like that. I mean, they were great, and we were obsessive about honesty. We actually became obsessive about customer service. We used to talk about it all the time, and told the Stu Leonard story. By the way, Stu Leonard, ended up going to jail for tax evasion, but still a hell of a story. So we were focused on, working smart, but really, I would tell you this, when somebody just, was duplicitous or backbiting within a company, they just, they kill an organization. It just doesn't last. You just have to find somebody else with that skill set. So.
I mean, you mentioned that to keep your core values simple. I mean, I see a lot of companies that have like 10 core values, and it's like, I can't remember 2 of them. I mean, do you think that's important to keep it simple and easy to understand?
Yeah, it's easier to remember when you keep them simple, when you keep them short. There are a lot of people, and we brought in consultants. One of my partners wanted to bring in consultants and talk about what the core values should be and all this, and what the mission should be. And I was really against it because nobody knows what the hell it really is after a while, and then nobody follows it. So it may feel good, but keeping it simple. Our business at NEW is market, administer, and inform, nice, fast, and right. That was the mission that we tried to do, and the values were pretty much golden rule based. It's a pretty easy one.
Actually, you have a core value or a clause that you guys require your LPs to sign at Swan, right? What's that called? A little clause they have to sign.
We got our lawyers to put in the contract a paragraph which is called the no assholes rule, and to label it that. And we kind of meant it. It's actually, they said, it's inappropriate to use that exact language. So they had to make it something that legally meant the same thing. It's actually called the provision against assholes. I wasn't good at Latin, but okay. Simply, you're going to spend all day with people. You want to be with people who you want to be with. You spend more of your waking hours with the people who you're working with, literally, more than your kids, more than your spouse, more than your significant other. And, this is who you're spending your waking hours with. If you're miserable 5 days a week, so that you can enjoy 2, those economics never work out. And we knew that. And the same thing applies with our LPs. Our LPs, their job is that most of them are local CEOs and who have been successful, and they grab an oar and help out a little bit. So we want people we want to be with. Also, because things don't always go perfectly, we want people who will imply good intent, and we will imply good intent with them, because it's a lot easier to fix issues. And honesty. Did I mention honesty?
Yes, you did.
Oh, good.
So you do apply this no assholes rule to entrepreneurs when you invest in startups?
Yeah, we make exceptions.
Okay. So actually,
yes, we do apply it. Yes.
So so my next question is, here's an entrepreneur. This a room full of entrepreneurs, and they're looking for money. You have a VC fund, $300 million. You've invested in many notable companies, including Optoro, Custom Make, FrameBridge, Kind, Quad Learning, Real-Time Cases. So what are the real requirements?
You didn't mention urban stems.
Oh, urban stems.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to give you the opportunity to.
Flowers. Let's give myself flowers.
Yeah. By the way, they are from urban stems here. I guess is the founder here?
Yeah, Ajay, right over there.
Okay, there you go.
These are badass. That's good.
But
it's cool.
If you,
it's my wife's birthday tomorrow.
Wow. Just save them. Okay, so the requirements.
You didn't mention anonymous content, Mr.
Well,
Robot.
I will talk about
good,
it.
Okay.
There's so much to cover here, so we won't have time for Q&A, so we're just going to go through these questions. But
I didn't tweet it to you, I realized that, but I did.
Okay. The requirements for when you want to invest in a startup, what do you look at first? Is it team? Is it the product? Is it the market? Like, what is it in order?
So most of what, and we're a little bit kind of two-tiered, and in that we deal with mostly later stage type of things that really are somewhat referenced in as we're talking with them by somebody says they're good folks, which I guess would mean it's the team. The team is everything. First and foremost, that's the table stakes. A great idea with a crappy team, I will never invest in, because all of a sudden you find there's a competitor that you didn't anticipate, something about the market that you didn't plan on. The very nature of a startup is surprise after surprise after surprise. and who you're in the foxhole with and what you're going to do when the next surprise comes along is going to have everything to do with who the team is. So, it's team and, product market fit, all those kind of things, have to be compelling. There's got to be, you really need to have big margins because people make mistakes. Things are not anticipated. Things do take longer than you thought about. In our particular case, we look for things that we think consumers, from the product side, that we think consumers, and we understand consumer a bit more than other aspects, that we think they're going to get passionate about, like stupid passionate about, because that also lets you make mistakes. Part of the things that we look for in a team is combining the consumer's passion into building a brand. And what's a brand? A brand is a promise that one organization is making to a mass of people, and because the people at the top are really, really good, they're going to keep fulfilling that promise. They're going to keep communicating that promise, and the brand is going to actually take on a life of its own and keep the product from being commoditized with or without a patent. And that's a huge deal. Kind, for example, has built a brand and they stick true to it. They can stick that brand on a lot of other stuff that they don't. And they're very, very focused on that. And that actually emanated out of a charitable business originally. Anyhow,
actually,
people first.
So I'd like to talk about your charitable activities, your philanthropic activities.
What do you need?
You're asking personally me how much I need? No, but you have Fight for Children and One Voice movement, and then you have the Schaufeld Family Heart Center. Why in those particular funds or those charitable organizations?
Well, first of all, the scholarship program, it goes back to the high school I originally went to, Westbury, New York, which is, hopefully there's nobody here from the Westbury Chamber of Commerce, which is really a crappy high school, okay? And there's just wonderful kids that come out of this place, and we have this kind of enveloping type of scholarship program that, and I was looking for kids that had something, kids that can handle college, but not necessarily the valedictorian who had something in their life beyond their control happen. And we now have 26 kids. We just had 19 come down for a retreat, and we have a couple social workers who work with them besides, the college scholarship programs. That's like the greatest thing in the world, and they're just beautiful kids. And the funny thing is, some of the kids don't. You get to a certain point where you think, well, maybe there's like a particular artist, and you say, well, finishing the degree in college isn't really the most important thing. It's doing what she's passionate about, but having the ability to get to that next platform for her. And anyway, so it's an offbeat kind of scholarship program. The heart program, my sister-in-law had a heart attack out in Loudoun County. Her heart actually stopped, and there was no heart center, nothing to deal with out there, and it felt very, very strongly that Inova had to do something out there. And I was able to get her to kick into it also, which was save some money. She did get better, but they had to take her by helicopter to Fairfax Hospital, which by drive would have been an hour from where we were. And as it turned out, my partner, Tony Nader, who's the N in Swan, is the incoming chair of Inova now. So I knew it was if you want to buy, and they got all this machinery in the Schaufeld Family Heart Center in Loudoun County. Like, if you want to buy machinery to help your heart, best thing to buy is like a treadmill. Okay, that's by far the best. But if that doesn't work out, then you got all this other stuff. So.
So I wanted to get into.
Wait, I just got to drop just one thing.
Yeah, sure.
So One Voice, and I'm sorry about this. One Voice was created to create peace between Israelis and Palestinians. That was the purpose of that. It was, the one voice of these two sides. From One Voice sprung the company originally called Peaceworks, and it's Kind, which Kind is an enormous company now with these, fruit, originally the fruit and nut bars, and there's a whole bunch of different Kind healthy snacks that are out there. Kind actually got the FDA to redefine what the word healthy means in the past year. Very, very powerful business. as far as the peace in the Middle East goes, they're killing it on that one. That's been a resounding success. All right, that was a joke. All right, it's not a success, but that was the roots of that particular company, and all these, people are working. At least they're making money. So
I'm just going to interject right here because
Okay.
you told me you've mentioned this many times, but anonymous content.
yes,
What do you want to talk about anonymous content? You're now into producing Hollywood films.
well,
Or helping?
the company Anonymous. I'm on
Yeah.
we invest in anonymous. Bless you. We invested in anonymous content, and we normally take a minority position in a company and a couple seats on the board. And thing about anonymous that's so great is anytime you go to a charitable event, you're the number one donor. Okay. See, that was a joke. Never mind that. Anonymous Content made a TV show that you got to see called Mr. Robot. All right, it's just an awesome show. It's like I don't want to be a spoiler, but the last episode was one of the most disgusting things I ever saw on TV. But it's a hell of a show. We did The Revenant. We did Spotlight, won the Academy Award for Best Picture. We did. True Detective. Unfortunately, we also did season 2 of True Detective. But and The Nick, which is President Obama's favorite TV show, and a whole bunch of others. I mean, I have to think that I have the ability to work with a Hollywood company is the weirdest thing in the world. But the attributes of that company and the things that company faces are the same things that every other company faces. The problems that they had were the mundane level problems. The talent, the creativity, they are like nobody else out there. But the things that hold it back are the same exact ego issues, mundane HR issues, things like that, accounting. And we were able to, we get super involved with these companies when we invest. So that's a lot of fun.
Okay.
You want to be in a movie?
Sure.
There we go.
I'm in the movie right there. Hi. Hi, Mom.
I have zero. I have as much chance of getting you to be point guard with the Wizards.
Did you meet Leo DiCaprio for Revenant?
Revenant. No.
Okay.
But I did
Pretty
fly. But I did fly cross country with Kate Winslet and her husband Ned Rock and Roll, who is and that is his official name, and who is Richard Branson's nephew.
So I want to do another quick
Yes.
change here because I
Absolutely.
told
You look
Jake
good.
that I would mention
Okay.
one of your investments. So I want to talk about DC Tech. DC Tech. So DC Tech. Any companies or startups here? Like, what is the advantage of starting a company here in DC? And what makes it better than Silicon Valley and New York? And then follow-up question is, what do you think is your best investment of a DC tech startup here?
So let's, first of all, I think DC is just a great town because it's a big little town. First of all, there are a lot of really bright people in DC. And contrary to the way it may appear around here, you're actually less arrogant than people in other towns. And it makes it easier to connect. New York is overwhelming, okay? I mean, you're gonna meet as many, as many entrepreneurs on the E-train as exist in DC maybe at any given point in time. I mean, it's just overwhelming. You can spend so much time going in wasteful directions, all right? And we do invest with a bunch of companies in New York. And I do like going there, but, and in California, and we do LA and the Valley, San Francisco area, there's so many people there that have the issue, the negative, and there's a lot of positives there, and we invest with Ron Conway out there, but the negative is that there's such an incredible sense of entitlement that people have who are out there, and two, they change with the absolute wind. So there is, there's no shame in failure, but you don't have to go for it all the time. I mean, you can succeed every now and then. You can just and there's just absolute, it's not even shifting sands. These things are built on absolute air. So DC's a smart town. Every organization in the world has a node into DC. That means every market in the world has a node into DC. I mean, it's a quirk that Internet 1.0 ended up here, because of AOL and UUNet and MCI. But those are but that was, PSINet. Those are the companies that were Internet, 1.0. And then you get these things that have spawned out of that. You got great universities here. You got Georgetown, GW, AU, Howard. You've got, University of Maryland. UVA's right around the corner. George Mason. I mean, it's a great town. I think it's a great town.
And your favorite startup investment?
Well, all right. My son has a startup investment, so
disclaimer: I had started working for Real-Time Cases, and then there's some Real-Time Cases folks here. Can I hear you guys say? Okay. Yeah. So, what's your favorite ed tech startup?
Well, I'd have to put that one aside because it would be unfair. Though I think it's a cool, great concept. Now, my fund directly, I can't put, we have different funds,
Yeah.
There's all kinds of conflicts.
Yeah.
But there's a company called Quad Learning, run by a guy, Phil Bronner, I don't know, and it trades under the name of American Honors College also. That is going to be an enormous business ultimately in the ed tech. And I know that not as big as Real-Time Cases, I'm sure.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
but that's a company that has, besides the fact I think it's going to be an enormous company, it does have a mission. It has some just awesome people on the board, including, besides Phil Bronner, John Katzman, who created Princeton Review and 2U, and so I think it's a big unknown that's around here. There's so many, and we're focused on tech-enabled. There is a value of tech for tech's sake. I just don't understand it from a financial perspective. It has to be more developed, before we go there. We really look at it from the market's perspective. So
we got two last questions.
Sure.
Because we're over time now. So first question is, what is the best piece of advice that I want to change it to your mother now. What's the best piece of advice that your mother gave to you as a teenager?
Well, yeah. It's funny. Both my mother and my father were. I don't know if there's a single piece of advice. And as I was thinking about it, because I knew you were going to ask that, but I would tell you, they were both really gracious people. They were both very thankful, very straight. I mean, and back to my father, he would get the lamest gifts from people. God, and he was so thankful and so appreciative. It made people feel good, and that cost nothing. And he was actually pretty successful in our little town, notwithstanding the near scandal. It was. So I mean, it costs nothing to be nice, to put yourself in other person's shoes. By the way, and it's not really from them specifically, but I see this behavior. They were not sucking up and kicking down. They were absolutely, being nice, to the people, who, economically weren't making as much money as they were, and they said be nice to the people on the way up because it's a much faster fall. But they weren't doing it for that reason. It really became just habit. So that was a pretty good piece of advice: being polite, being, holding doors for people, not being an asshole.
Right. Before I ask this one last question,
and use condoms.
Got it. Okay. I
Don't
forgot.
think about that too much.
Actually, I wanted to mention, because it's worth mentioning, but you sold majority of NEW Was it the aggregate value came out to about 2.8 billion? And then around there?
Yeah, I did not get the majority of that.
Right, sure.
If I did, you think I'd be sitting here today?
But I mean, it just.
But yes, it worked out quite well.
Yeah, right.
But by the way, the original investment really was $79 in equity and a $20,000 loan. But so the IRR on that is pretty decent.
Pretty good, yeah. It's pretty decent. So the last question we always ask all of our speakers, and they all have answers, different answers, but I felt that this is the most important. So who's your favorite superhero or historical figure and why?
So before I answer that question, okay, and it's going to be Abraham Lincoln because he was straight up, put it all out there, and and for all I can see, judged within his time was pretty impressive. That's going to be my answer, okay? But before I answer that question, I got to go back to the Elon Musk thing. I met Elon Musk and Peter Thiel when they were like, so how did they sell, how did they make their money? They made their money selling PayPal to eBay. Meg Whitman, who ran eBay, hated them, tried to put them out of business, created a competitor. They were a kludgy system. And what did they do? eBay, twice a year, would get together a group of their power sellers in Reno, Nevada. People who, before eBay came along, were selling satellite dishes out of the trunk of their car, and they were selling backgammon sets and shag rugs, and they were just a certain type of person, and they had bumper stickers all over their car. They climbed this place, and it went down there, and blah, 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 and grandma's tied to the roof. I mean, that was the type of person who would come to eBay Live in Reno, Nevada. And the thing that Elon Musk and Peter Thiel realized is that these people, if you give them a t-shirt, they're gonna wear it. And they printed these PayPal t-shirts and overwhelmed Meg Whitman to the point where she gave up and bought this company because they all wore it, because it was free. And they bought this company for $1 billion, and it was amazing how pedestrian the thing that really moved the needle was. By the way, which is one of the things that made me feel good about investing in Custom Ink years later. But hearing that story, I said, oh my God, it really made a big difference. So just a little bit about Elon Musk, that he was, I know he's Iron Man now, and that's like awesome, and I wish I was Iron Man, all right? And I have tremendous respect for him. We have a bunch of Teslas. My wife just goes on and on. I'm surprised we don't have pinups of him in our bedroom. Probably does in fantasy world. But it has to be Honest Abe, right? Straight shooter.
Why?
Really?
Yeah.
Have you ever taken history? I mean, the guys that, not that I want a bullet in the back, but, look, I mean, there's few people in the world that move that much and sacrifice that much and make that big a difference. It's, you look at, politicians today and how easy it is to compromise your values for as he understood them, as he knew the world, he was, pretty impressive. Far from perfect, but, I look at relative to today and the information that's available, what's out there, and he looks kind of good, so that's it.
So obviously you told me the answer, and we always, and I'm so glad you talked about the t-shirt thing with Elon Musk, because you told me the answer for your historical figure, and we got you here we go. This is Abraham Lincoln called the Emancipator. so this is your t-shirt for you. So
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fred Schaufeld. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks.
All right.